Hi there, Deidre Kennedy here from the Pacifica Historical Society and tonight's hostess of the show Footprints of Pacifica. We get together to discover and explore the lure and lore of scenic Pacifica, its character and characters. Tonight the topic is Mike Casey, host of the popular history TV show on PenTV. Welcome to the show, Mike.
We're going to start over. We had some difficulties.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Hi there, Deidre Kennedy here from the Pacifica Historical Society and tonight's hostess of the show Footprints of Pacifica. We get together to discover and explore the lure and the lore of scenic Pacifica, its character and its characters. Tonight the topic is Mike Casey, host of a popular history show on PenTV. Welcome to the show, Mike. We're so happy you're here with us tonight.
Thanks for inviting me, Deidre.
First, we'd like to learn a little more about your background.
Sure.
From wherever emerged your interest in history?
I guess I can't remember when I haven't been interested in history. I was an undistinguished history major in college, but I guess when you think of history, the last 5 letters are story. And I know a lot of people think history is boring, but I never was one of those people. And I guess the other saying, truth is stranger than fiction, I find that to be true. And I guess when I read history or watch history movies, I'm always thinking about how was life different then, and how is it like life now? That's always curious for me to find out. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. How did you become involved in the history TV show at PenTV?
To me, it's an amusing story because I didn't aspire to it. It all started about 12 years ago when Mitch Postal's son, who's the director of the San Mateo County History Museum, his son was in my class, and every summer they have the history days during August, and they were doing a reenactment of the Broderick Terry duel. In fact, they were putting David Terry on trial for murder of David Broderick, and they needed somebody to play that part. They had nobody. Christy, Mitch's wife, said, "How about Mr. Casey? He speaks clearly." So that was my first foray into historical reenactment at the County Museum, and I proceeded to do that every year. Victorian days is the word I'm looking for, the Victorian days in August and September. And anyway, a couple of years ago, one of them was filmed for PenTV Turns out the CEO of PenTV at the time was my old college buddy, Mark Naismith. So he saw me do the enactment and he said, Mike, I have this idea for history segments, a history show. Would you be interested in hosting it? So as you can see, I did not aspire to be a historical reenactor or to be a host of a history series. I guess I was doing a favor for two of my friends, and here I am.
The best
In fact,
volunteer.
yeah, that's how I got here, because somebody saw me on PenTV, and you asked me to be here. So once again,
Yes.
I'm just doing favors for people along the way.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah.
In the reenactment, did they have you dressed in period costume?
Yes, they do. Yeah, we in fact, two of the segments I've done for PenTV was the Broderick Terry duel out at Lake Merced, by Lake Merced, and the flood trial, the famous James Flood, Constance Flood trial of I think it started in 27, but it didn't come to court trial to 1930 with all the delays and depositions. So that was another reenactment. So I use those as sources for two of the segments on my program. Two interesting, very
Yes.
interesting.
What were some of your favorite stories over the 25 shows that you filmed?
I think for a whimsical one, down by the Burlingame train station, there was a building that was up for 75 years. It was raised about maybe 5 years ago, and because of its demolishment, an old wall ad, the kind you might have seen in the early part of the 20th century, mid-20th century, where they painted an ad on a wall of a building,
Yes.
it emerged. And it was an old sign for the Severn Dairy, which was on the Howard property in Burlingame. And then it was restored by Clear Channel. And if you go down to Burlingame now, it's a depiction of a little boy riding a dairy truck for Severn Valley Dairies, and it was hidden for 75 years. So that one, just for the charm of it, was very interesting. For something that nobody knows about, one of the most recent ones I did was involving the United States invasion of Russia during World War I,
My.
which involved 8,000 troops from Camp Fremont in Menlo Park. 15,000 other troops were added from the Philippines. So, Deidre, you can see I sort of stretch San Mateo history to include things beyond the county lines, but 8,000 of those troops did come from San Mateo County.
Local boys.
Yeah, and they were trying to establish an Eastern Front in World War I because the Bolsheviks had had a separate peace with Germany.
Yes.
So there was only the Western Front left. So Wilson wanted to establish that Eastern Front again. He was trying to recruit the Czech army, which had deserted from the Austrian-Hungarian army, which was part of the German side in the war. The fact was, though, they stayed there for 5 months after the war was declared over, after the armistice. So the theory was that Wilson was trying to defeat Bolshevism at the same time. But he didn't really state that at the time. And Hiram Johnson, the progressive Republican senator from California, led a charge in the Senate demanding to know when our boys were coming home from Russia. So that, to me, was something that is a very striking story in our history that I don't think too many people know about.
I didn't know about it.
Yeah, and it has a San Mateo County connection.
It does, and they were truly over there,
Right.
on the Eastern Front.
All the doughboys from the Western Front came home in November and December of 1918. These troops stayed there till I think May of 1919. They stayed way after the war was over.
Yes.
So that was quite a controversial incident in our history. And once again, I repeat, that a lot of people are not aware of.
Right.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you. There's also some interesting characters I'm sure you've discovered over the 25 shows you've done.
Well, one character that I think deserves more recognition, if you travel in the western part of San Mateo County in the Redwoods, you may have come across Sam McDonald Park. A lot of people are not aware of who Sam McDonald is. He was one of the few African Americans to have a position of administrative position in a major university in America in the 20th century. He was the head of the building and grounds of Stanford University. He owned property in the Redwoods. He was the only African American to own property in the Redwoods at the time. He was one of the few African Americans that had a position in an administrative capacity at a major university at that time. He was very active with the Stanford Convalescent Home for Children. When he died, he willed all of his property, which I think by the time he died, about 300, 400 acres in the Redwoods, to the Stanford Convalescent Hospital. They did not have an immediate need for it, so they donated it to the county. So to me, that's very interesting. He was a very interesting character. He was an authority on football fields and track and field. A lot of people consulted him during that time frame from about 1920 to 1955 or so. Sam McDonald Park, a lot of people have heard of it, but don't know the character. So once again, I was always I'm thinking, what kind of program should I do where somebody will say, I didn't know that. And those are two examples, Sam McDonald and the Russian invasion or the U.S. invasion of Russia during World War I.
And part of history, I believe, is to also highlight and showcase the generous hearts that people have. And Sam McDonald was a wonderful and generous heart, working both with children, and his legacy is in the park where all children can enjoy.
Which brings
children
to
of
mind,
all ages.
Brings to mind another story of A.P. Giannini talking about generous hearts. A.P. Giannini, the founder of, or should I say this, the president of the Bank of Italy. It was already existed, but it then merged with the Bank of America. But during the earthquake, the 1906 earthquake, he was at his Seven Oaks mansion in San Mateo. He traveled back into the city as far as he could on the railroad. Luckily, his teller of the Bank of Italy had the foresight to go to the vault at the Crocker Bank where they kept their securities in gold and silver.
Yes.
He got it out before it got too heated, brought it back to the Bank of Italy.
What a miracle.
They were worried about looters. Giannini had a prior experience in the produce business in San Francisco. Right. He appropriated a number of produce wagons. He was worried about looters. He walked with his employees 18 miles to his mansion in San Mateo, hid $80,000 in gold and silver in his fireplace. And then when the fire subsided, he brought it back to San Francisco, and North Beach was one of the first areas to be rebuilt because Giannini had the cash, the money right there. Wells Fargo and Crocker Bank did not have the foresight to open their vaults. They were too hot to open, so Giannini was the only game in town. So speaking of people with generosity and foresight, he helped rebuild North Beach. It was the first area. Once again, we're going out of the boundaries of San Mateo County, but Giannini's mansion was in San Mateo, and that's where he first left and brought the money there from San Francisco. So once again, we're stretching those boundaries a little bit for San Mateo County history stories.
That's quite all right, because it's a ripple effect. He was a member, he was a resident of our county, and he had a wonderful ripple effect on both San Francisco and the surrounding area.
Right, and I guess I should say regarding the generosity, at the time banks only catered to the very rich. So his whole philosophy of banking really revolutionized and sort of democratized it. So in my research for Giannini, I really learned a lot about him, and that whole story of bringing all the $80,000 in gold and silver on produce wagons to his home and then back again, that to me was another interesting story, one that I learned a lot about San Mateo County history story in preparing it.
Yes. What do you think has been overlooked in exploring some of the things? What other areas might you use for future shows?
Well, because I'm not a professional historian, I drew a lot of my sources from Mitch Postal's book on the history of San Mateo County.
It's a beautiful book.
And there's plenty of stories in there that I haven't covered. The other historian that Mitch referred me to, Alan Hiding, from Frontier to Suburb, his book is also a source of other stories. And Deidre, I'm going to be doing 24 total. I've filmed 22. 2 more are in the offing, and then really my funding is out. So there's plenty of stories left in those books. If you take a look through the County History Museum, there's also a great section on the immigrant groups of San Mateo County. I've done a segment on the Japanese in San Mateo County and the Chinese, but there's many other immigrant groups that have made a great contribution to our county. I haven't even gotten to all of those. So that would be another area. There's a section down there on entrepreneurs of San Mateo County. A lot of people think of the Silicon Valley, but a lot of innovations in technology in the 20th century came from people living in San Mateo County. So that would
Yes.
be another area
San
also.
Carlos, Ital.
Right, exactly.
That whole area down there,
Yeah.
Redwood City.
So I've told a lot of stories, but there's a lot more to be told. Yeah,
Good
definitely.
to know.
Yeah.
And that's with history. We just, as we peel back the layers of an onion, you'll find more and more
Right.
fascinating things. And
Right.
They
One
were-
other thing that comes to mind, and this was in the back of my mind, but when
Yes.
you think of Leo Ryan and the Guyana tragedy
Oh,
in
yes.
Jonestown, we forget Leo Ryan started out as a history teacher at Cappuccino High School.
Bless his heart.
Later ran for Congress, so that's another story that would be great. That's maybe more contemporary.
yes,
Yeah.
Jackie Spear might be able to help us with that.
Yes. Yeah.
Call her up. Right. Thank you. Do you think in the future history shows will have a greater part in the classroom?
Yeah, I would think so. I would think, you know, I was a teacher. I've been retired for 5 years now, but when I go back to help out at my old school, there's more media involved in everything in classrooms now. And so I can't help but think in the area of history that will also be the case. And there's probably things going on that just because I'm not in the classroom every day, probably going on that I'm not aware of.
We can certainly hope so.
Yeah.
We're working on right now the 151st show of Footprints of Pacifica, and so our CDs are available, DVDs are available for purchase and to see on our website,
That's great.
pacificahistory.org, and we hope to get the word out
Yeah.
of our Coastside and Pacifica history. In your shows, your 22 shows, did you feature the Coastside or Pacifica in any of them?
The last two, which are not edited or filmed yet, we're going to do 24 all told. The 23rd one I've already filmed, it hasn't been edited yet, was bootlegging on the coast during Prohibition.
Oh my.
And one thing I learned about was Jack Morey from Morey Point. He was one of the most notorious bootleggers on the coast. He had a donkey engine, breeches buoy, he had you know, cables coming across from the ship to shore. There's a story of when they raided his farm, they found 24,000 cases of illegal contraband liquor.
What a rascal.
So that's one of them. And then I think for my 24th one, I'm going to be doing something from the Sanchez Adobe about the Mexican period in San Mateo history, the Rancho period.
Yes.
So those are two
Yes.
that come to mind right now. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Let me suggest Shirley Dry is a wonderful resource for that as well.
Okay, thank
She's
you.
one of our members and just a fountain of knowledge.
Great.
Yes, it was the first museum I ever attended as a small child in the 3rd grade. You just look up. At that time, I was looking up into the dusty saddles, and
Right.
before I know it, I was a history major at Davis, and the next thing you know,
Yeah.
here we sit.
Yeah.
And so things just work like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember the first museum you visited as a small child?
Well, it's not a history museum, but I guess because I'm a native San Franciscan, I remember the Academy of Sciences.
Oh my, yes.
And that is the first thing that comes to mind. Yeah, I know it's not a
Indelible.
history. There's some natural history there.
Oh,
but
indeed.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the first large collection you probably saw.
Yeah.
And to a small child, it's just wonderment, pure
Right.
wonderment.
And my father was an electrician in the city, so he wired the planetarium, so there was always that family connection.
Yes.
In fact, when they changed over to the new planetarium, our whole family went out to see one last show from the old planetarium.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
a great
for old
tidbit.
time's sake, yeah.
Thank you. That was special. Yes. The Coastside and Pacifica, we have quite a wealth of history. We are opening our own history museum soon,
Right.
the end of July, and we hope to invite everyone to see our exhibits
Right.
and offer ideas for exhibits in the future.
Yeah, and you know, I might mention Daryl Fredericks, who wrote the column for the Daily Journal on history. I got some ideas from him. And I believe Michael Savanovic and Shirley Burgett, which are a husband and wife team, they had another book where they just listed every historical event in San Mateo County. And Deidre, I'm aware of many of them in Pacifica, but I've only done 22 shows, so you'll have to
Right.
forgive me
That's
that
quite
I
all
haven't
right.
gotten to Pacifica yet.
Right. That's plenty of fodder for future
Oh yeah,
shows.
there's plenty of ideas left, yeah. Yeah.
Great. What would you like to see as an exploration in the historical areas, age appropriate, to interest our younger historians?
Well, one thing that comes to mind when I did teach social studies on a 5th grade level, towards the end of my career, the books, one thing I enjoyed about the books is whatever there was an historical event, they offered diverging opinions. So to me, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, in 5th grade, we covered American history, the Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War. What I liked is they had first excerpts, or what's the word I'm looking, primary sources.
Yes,
They had
primary
primary
source.
sources not only from the major historical figures,
Mm-hmm.
but from regular people. I guess it's sort of like when Ken Burns does it. He
Yes.
has letters, he has statements from
Yes.
other people that were involved in those events, but on a level that you might not read about in a history book. So
right.
to me, that is extremely interesting. And I guess maybe it's just me, but to me, that would interest everybody.
It's,
Maybe that's just me, I don't know.
No, because we're regular people, and we write letters, and we have journals, and we have diaries, and we have tales of important things in our lives, and those are the guideposts
Yeah.
and the signposts, and those are the things that become remembered and become used later by Ken Burns or
Right.
whoever's
I
Ken
agree.
Burns in 300 years from now will be
Yeah.
using those same
Right.
items, and the
I might bring up an anecdote. My son was a history major and archivist, and he was doing a history of my wife's family and my family grew up in Butchertown, which is the southeastern part of San Francisco where the cows came in. That's why it was called Butchertown. And he told the story of my wife's grandfather who came over from Ireland
my
when he was 13 years old. His passage was paid, but he had to get to California to meet his brother. Nobody knew this story until my son asked my wife's aunt. Apparently, an African American man befriended him in New York, and they rode the rails all the way across the country, working their way, knocking on doors, getting fed, working their way. He got to Santa Maria. The guy said, here you are, this is where your brother is. He never saw him again. But there's a story where we never heard it, and it was just the fact that my son asked my wife's aunt for memories of growing up in Butchertown, and we found this fantastic story of how he got across the United States.
13 years old.
Yeah. And that's another thing to think about, that somebody was so desperate in their situation that they sent their 13-year-old son across the ocean to get to California.
And then across the continent.
Yeah, yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and the kindness of strangers is
Right.
never to be discounted.
And I must emphasize, nobody in the family would have known this in our generation if my son just didn't happen to ask my wife's aunt, tell me some memories of your family, of Butchertown. And then she related that story, which I thought was a great story.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's a lesson for all of us. Look and find those elder members of your family and
Right.
write those stories down.
Yeah, they always say that, and this is one
Yeah.
situation that proves the point. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Great. Let's see, we have some more questions here. My goodness. When you read historical fiction and view historical movies, what are some of your favorites?
Well, let's see. Inherit the Wind is like based on a historical event.
Yes.
But I remember when I was a kid watching Spencer Tracy and the Clarence Darrow part. So
yes.
that, Ben Kingsley and Gandhi, Daniel Day-Lewis in Lincoln, those are ones that come to mind right away. Ones that
Yes.
stick in my mind. But that Inherit the Wind, I remember when I was about 14 years old when I saw that.
Riveting.
Yeah, yeah, great performances and a great story. Yeah.
When you were teaching in your classroom, did you show historical movies or historical documentaries?
Yeah, and we tried to do historical reenactments. We did a You Are There. I think a number of years ago we did the old Walter Cronkite You Are There from the 1950s.
Oh, yes.
We did that for the Boston Tea Party, where we had the kids dress up in costumes and be interviewed. And I guess we're aging ourselves if we remember You Are There by Walter
yes.
Cronkite.
That's okay.
Pacificans, you can look it up on YouTube or Google
Right.
Video if you don't know about You Are There. The other interesting thing is I taught for 39 years at Portola School up on Sweeney Ridge, and many of our students did not know that the discovery of San Francisco Bay by Europeans was up on Sweeney Ridge, about 2 or 3 miles up from our school. So when that school opened in 1965, part of the dedication ceremonies is they had a reenactment of that discovery on stage at the dedication ceremonies. As the years went on, nobody really made that connection. And in fact, California history in the state history series for California history made no mention of Portola, San Francisco Bay at all. So in 1985, we started, and I must say we're borrowing this from the society that, I forget the name of the society in Pacifica that walks up from Crespi up to there to reenact it every year. I don't know the organization. Could it be yours?
Pacific Historical Society sponsors a hike up there.
All right,
and also,
well, I must say I stole
and a
the idea
dedication.
from you. And we go up from the
You're
other
welcome
side of
to it.
Sweeney Ridge. We figure because our school is named Portola, we have
Yes.
some rights to the...
Oh, indeed.
So anyway, we stole your idea, and since 1985, the student body goes up on the day most convenient to November the 4th,
Right.
which is the day. Sometimes it doesn't fall exactly on the most convenient day, but as close to November the 4th, we talk about that discovery, and we hike up there from our side of the ridge.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Carl McCarthy was instrumental in
Right.
promoting that, and his daughter, Patricia McCarthy Kremer, is now doing an exhibit on the Portola land discovery of
Yeah.
San Francisco Bay
Right.
for our
And I
museum
see their
opening.
names prominent on the plaques up there.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yes, and we're just so thankful for them and their documentation. Also, Rick Della Santina has also gone back into the original journals, and he's translated from the Spanish into the 3 journals that are extant
Right.
that describe this discovery, and the 200 people that came from Lower Mexico on this journey
Yeah.
of discovery, and it was quite by accident. Who
Right.
would think?
Like a lot of discoveries
Yes.
by accident.
Yes,
Right.
a happy accident.
Right.
And they know they missed Monterey, but they didn't know exactly where they were. But
Right.
my goodness, that's a large body of water, and I know that's the ocean on the other side. And so
Right.
we and here we are.
Yeah, it's interesting that it was an overland expedition. A lot of people would think it would be by ship, the discovery of the bay, but turns out it was by an overland exhibition. Yeah,
Right.
expedition, excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're certainly thankful for your participation this evening and all of your good work on PenTV. And I'd like to highlight the website where they can find your shows. Everyone in our audience can find your shows and enjoy them as much as I did. They're lively, they're fun, and you learn a little something you didn't know before.
That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your contribution, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Glad to be here, Deidre. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Well, that's about all we have time for today. We want to thank you, Mike Casey, for joining us and sharing your stories. And hopefully we'll have more stories coming up down the road. We thank the
History
Pacific-
is being made even as we speak, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And we'd like to thank also the Pacifica Historical Society for providing this wonderful platform and way of preserving history. If you want to get involved with the Pacifica Historical Society and our many projects, our address is Box 752, Pacifica 94044. Our telephone number is 650-359-5462. And our website is www.pacificahistory.org. We're also on Facebook, Pacifica Historical Society. So please join us there and like us. Thank you for watching our show. And as we say goodnight this evening, we'd like to remember the words of Longfellow and our dear Frank Winston. Lives of the great. And departing, leave our footprints in the sands of time.